So hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on operational flood forecasting. It's really good to have you with us. My name is Gareth James Lloyd and I have the pleasure of being your host for the next hour and providing technical support. I have my good colleague Maya Batule. Maya and I have regular day jobs at the UNEP DHI Centre, a United Nations Environment Collaboration Centre on freshwater and environmental issues. A big part of our work is about helping organizations and individuals solve water management issues. So that's why we're here today. A bit about the webinar itself. It's a standalone webinar organized by ourselves in collaboration with our DHI colleagues with inputs from a range of experts who I'll get back to you in a couple of minutes about. But first, a little bit of context. As you know, natural cycles, climate change, and other influences are combining to create increasingly severe flooding events. These in turn cause widespread social, environmental, and economic problems in many areas around the world. But it's not all gloom and doom. The good news is that available flood early warning and forecasting systems and mitigation measures, they're improving all the time. And recent advances in spatial modeling of floods, modern geoinformation systems and remote sensing, these kind of things are opening up new and promising areas for flood control. In this webinar on operational flood forecasting, we hope that you'll be able to gain an insight into some of these modern systems through examples from Thailand and Denmark. I should also probably add that while the tools we're showing today are quite specific, there are of course other providers out there and similar kind of tools. So please don't consider this as any kind of sales pitch, but more of a knowledge sharing event. Today, I'm very pleased to let you know that we have three experts who are going to be sharing their knowledge and experiences with us regarding operational flood forecasting. More specifically, they'll be showing us what they've learned and how they've applied their skills in relation to these tools in some real life contexts. We have a couple of examples from Thailand and one from Denmark. And while the examples may not be from the geographies of immediate relevance for you, there will of course be many things which are of learning value in multiple settings, or at least that's the idea. Just to quickly run through the procedure here. Kicking off, we have Anne Piaman of the National Hydroinformatics Institute in Thailand, and will be giving us an overview of an operational flood forecasting real-time system. Next up, we have my colleague Jakob Luckner of DHI. Jakob will be talking about the extension of a flood forecasting system to include real-time control of reservoirs using something called model predictive control. And then rounding off the presentations, we have Torsten Van Jacobsen, also of DHI, who will be sharing what he's learned regarding the application of an early warning flood system in Denmark. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and I will ask Anne to share her screen and start presenting. Anne, if you can do that, I'll let you know as soon as we can hear you.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes, that all looks good and we can hear you well. Please feel free to go on, Anne. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone again. My name is Anne Piamansi Sompon from Hydroinformatics Institute, Bangkok, Thailand. And today I would like to share with you our real-time operational flood forecasting that we have developed in close collaboration with DHI since 2012. So for the main motivation of this development, it was the severe flood in 2011 that destroyed the country economy. We found a missing gap in the flood management that although there are a lot of data and models available, but they were not readily to use and not support the operation and decision making. So we need a tool to provide the real-time data to reflect the situation, and also the model to provide the forecast, scenarios, consequences. And with the advancement of computer technology, this becomes possible to link the data and model together in one single platform. So this picture shows the water system and the tools that we can use to measure it. With today's technologies, we can estimate almost all portion of water in the system, as well as to model it using various techniques. So in this presentation, I would like to cover two important parts. The first one is about the monitoring or the observations, which consist of real time and some radar and satellite data. And the second part would be the models that we use to forecast the flood. So HAI has developed the telemetering technology to measure the rainfall since 2004. And until present, we have 957 stations already, which are 600 weather stations to measure rainfall, and 357 water level stations cover almost entire major rivers in Thailand. And we use this in our flood forecast system. This data also available via website and mobile app. If you search for Thai water, you will find this, so everyone can access to this information. The second source that we use in our real-time system is the weather radar. So we apply this weather radar with the collaboration from Department of Royal Rainmaking and Agricultural Aviation. We developed the 5 composite weather radar to estimate the rainfall and also run some near real-time forecast 1 to 3 hours. So this data is very useful, so we can kind of see the almost real time of the rainfall in the area, and we apply this in our flash flood models. And then the last one that we use in our system is the satellite rainfall. This type of data is very useful because of the space and time consistency and the coverage that cover everywhere in the country. So it kind of fill the gap of the rain gauge that sometimes is sparse or the density may not be enough. For example, in the remote area or on the upstream mountain area. So next is the model part that I would like to cover in this presentation. Is the river model, cover the major basin and then the small scale for the flash flood. So since 2012, HAI and DHI has a close collaboration, and then we developed the first flood model that works in operation. So the first model was in Chao Phraya River Basin. And then later we extend our model to cover almost all major basins in Thailand. So along with the flood forecasting development, we also did some researches in relevant to the flood management. All this has installed on the same platform, linking data and models, creating a huge decision support system that has been used in many real situations already. So this is our first model, how it looked like. This is the Chao Phraya model. So Chao Phraya is the most important river in Thailand. It's frequently flooding and also by its area, it occupy almost 30% of the country area, with topographic ranging from high mountain in the north toward the flat area in the lower part. There are reservoirs, barrage, and a lot of gates, especially in the lower part. So it was very challenging to develop the model and especially to make it operational. We have developed the 1D model. The river part cover the entire Chao Phraya. And for the lower part, the 2D model. Both 1D and 2D, they are connected and run operationally, providing the forecast for the 7 days ahead. So after the first model developed for Chao Phraya, later we extend our model to cover other regions of Thailand. And this presentation shows the dashboard of our flood forecasting system. So we provide the forecast for discharge and water level at the key station in the major river basin. Apart from the flood forecast, we also use our model to run some simulations to find the impacts and consequences to support many situations in Thailand already during the past years. This slide shows a flood simulation from last year that we have two storms comes in a near duration. So this is show the flood in the northeastern part of Thailand. This flooding event was rather interesting as there are two river basins, Chi and Moon, merged together, and it started to flood from inside and flow toward the east and drain into Mekong River. The distance is very long and the flood took about 1 month until it recovered. So we used the model to estimate the flooding area, the impact of the reservoirs and other relevant structures, and also the duration until the flood was relieved. All information that we did in the analysis was used to support the Flood Management and Mitigation Committee and the National Flood Center. Apart from the flood model that we developed to forecast for the flood that coming from the river, there is also the flood that rapidly occurs, especially on the high slope area that the river model cannot cover. So there was the idea to develop the flash flood forecasting and warning system by using the combination of FFPI, soil moisture, and hourly rainfall forecast. This system has been set up operational and recently is still being developed in order to find the right trigger event, the right amount of the rainfall, and then how we can provide the warning for the flash flood area. So in this model, we also applied the real-time data from the telemetering and radar. They are very important rainfall data in this model. This is also the same approach that we apply the FFPI for the head catchment in Lamtakong in the northeastern part of Thailand. The idea is to have a quick warning for the area that the flash flood or runoff can quickly occur, and based on the area that has a high slope terrain. The model is still under development as well. So in general, the forecast is most accurate for the first 3 days, and depending a lot on the forecast of the rainfall, and then on the following day, the accuracy reduced accordingly. For the overall performance of our flood forecast, it is found that for the key station that maintain good quality and consistency of real-time data, and also the data from the operational structures. If we can keep the quality of those data, the forecast performance of this key station are usually good and quite satisfactory. Every few years, we do a revisit of the model in order to maintain the quality of the forecast and to make sure that our technology is up to date. In beginning of the development, we spend most of the time connecting data and models and made it operational. And then later we try to gather more data. We did some surveys, we gained more observations, and then we could improve the quality of the model. And now recently, our focus is moving toward the new technology for data importing, reporting tool, and a proper visualization that meets the need of the user. And this is the mock-up of the ongoing project that we are still try to updating and upgrading our system. And hopefully we will have a nicer look that meets all requirements of the user. So in conclusion, from our experience for the almost 10 years for the flood forecasting development. We see the strength of the successful development of the real-time flood forecasting system that can be used in a real situations. And this, in another way around, it enhances the importance of the integration of data and model with the support of the computer technology. And it also clearly shows the ability and efficiency to support the decision-making process. So here comes to an end of my presentation. I would like to thank all the participants and also to show you most important guys who stand behind all these excellent works. So the high modeling team. So thank you all, and you can find more information from this QR code or email to me or to my team. Thank you.
Many thanks for that, Anne. Please stay with us. We will include you for the question and answers later. I would now like to move on to Jakob.
And so hello to everybody. I'm Jakob Luchner, and I work at the Water Resource Department at DHI. And I have worked on several projects together with Dr. Anne and Hai on the real-time flood forecasting systems that she just presented. And here I would like to share with you some insights on the model predictive control component in one of our last projects in the northeastern part of Thailand. I will use, I saw a comment in the panel list that I will use a pointer so that I can show you what I'm talking about. So some background on the project. So as Dr. Anne mentioned, is that after regular times, the real-time forecasting systems, they need some maintenance, improvements, or updates with respect to new data, maybe recalibration of models, and also extending maybe with some special features. And this project was about the northeastern part of Thailand, so a basin that consists of two rivers, the Chi and Moon rivers, that drain into the Mekong River in the northeastern part of Thailand. And this project was about updating the hydrological model and the hydrodynamic model with latest information and recalibrate or validate them, and then add two features that the system didn't have until then. And that was about adding a flash flood guidance that was also in the slides by Dr. Anne, and adding real-time control of two dams in the system, the Ubaratana Dam and the Lampao Dam, to minimize the flooding downstream of these two dams using a method called model predictive control. And this is what I will talk about now in the coming slides. So a bit about the system characteristic where we apply the model predictive control. Like, we divided the entire model into a submodel where the model predictive control is applied to optimize or control the releases of the two dams, the Ubaratana Dam and the Lampao Dam, in coordination in order to reduce flooding downstream of the dams. You can see here on the map an example of the flood extent in 2017. So there's considerable flooding regularly in the river basin. And we have identified some key locations where the target is to stay below a flow target. So the optimization problem is to operate the dams in order to avoid the exceedances of the flows in these target locations. So what is the principle of MPC? MPC is an optimization method that can be used to derive optimal decisions of different systems. And here we apply it on optimizing the release decisions of the two dams. MPC does this analytically. That means it defines a simplified model to derive the optimal decisions in one go without having to simulate more than one simulation. And the special part, and I think also the reason why MPC is very suited for real-time real-time systems is that it optimizes the decision, it optimizes the system in forward-moving windows. And within these forward-moving windows, there's always a comparison between the simplified model that is used to derive the optimal release decisions and the high-fidelity model, here in this case, a Mike 11 model, which is the best representation of the real world. So we are taking from the high-fidelity model, we're taking the initial conditions to start off the optimization and then use the simplified model to derive optimal release decisions, which are then enforced in the Mike 11 model to provide decision support to the release decisions and enforce these until the next forecast is available. So the optimal decisions are always updated with the latest information. There's, as in any, let's say, optimization methods, such a problem consists of two main tasks. And the first one is to calibrate the simplified model that the release decisions are based on. And the second is to define the objective function and tune the weights or penalties in between the different targets in the objective function. So let's talk first a bit about the calibration of the model. Here you can see a schematization of the linear surrogate model of this sub area of the G river. The elements in the surrogate model are reaches and reservoirs, and the calibration parameters on the reservoir is the level volume curve, and on the reaches is the length of the reach and the delay time by which the flow is delayed linearly throughout the reach. You can see here that the whole target or the objective of the optimization problem is to follow as much as possible a rule curve in the reservoir in order not to jeopardize long-term targets, and to release flow from the reservoir so that certain target flows are not exceeded downstream of the reservoirs. The reaches should not be too long in order for the surrogate model to match the high fidelity model, and you need to define ending points wherever there is a target location in order to control the flow in these locations. We calibrated this on sample events of a selection of monsoon periods, and derived the following delay times for the system. Then in an exercise on several monsoon periods, we tuned the weights of the objective function to derive the desired output in the downstream locations. We ran this for observed runoff and for actual forecasted runoff based on a WRF model for the monsoon period 2017. And here now you see many lines, but let me talk you through this slowly. So we can see that the main target of this optimization problem is to follow the rule curve in both dams as much as is possible, and on the same time not exceed the threshold levels at the downstream locations here in the Ubaratana system, so E22B and E8A, and in the Lampao system, the E87, 95, and E2A. The comparison between these lines here is between the rule curve operation simulated by Mike 11, you see here the water level in the dashed line, and the MPC controlled water level and releases, that is in solid line. You can see the water level in the Ubaratana and the Lampao. And in the downstream locations, the darker lines indicate the MPC results, and the lighter lines, the Mike 11 rule curve operation, simulated rule curve operation. We can see that the MPC compared to the Mike 11 simulation utilizes the whole storage of both dams in order to lower the flood peaks in the downstream locations. And comparing to an optimization of the single system, we can see that this happens in coordination. So here we compared how the flow in the furthest downstream, in the downstream locations of the Lampao Dam look like if you only optimize the releases from the single system, so the Lampao Dam, compared to the optimization of both dams in coordination. And you can see the yellow line shows the flow at the furthest downstream location if you only optimize the releases from the Lampao Dam in separation, and the red line indicates the flow at this location if you optimize both dams in coordination. And you can see that there is a significant advantage of can be achieved by optimizing this both dams in coordination. On this single system, we did some test of computation time, or how long it takes, and this reveals one of the main advantages of the MPC. As I mentioned before, that the MPC is based, optimizes or derives the optimal release decision analytically, which means that you need to run only one simulation run. And compared to population-based algorithms that need to run several simulations in order to converge, it takes only seconds to optimize one forecast compared to several hours. So this gives an option to run this optimization with other combination of weights or penalties many times in order to find the desired output. Last but not least, this system, or the MPC derived releases, are operationalized in the decision support system to give decision support to the operators in three scenarios. One scenario giving the rule curve operation from the Mike 11, and one scenario giving the MPC results if you apply MPC every day to control the releases of the both dams, and another real-time scenario where the system moves forward with the actual releases of the dams, and where you have the option to apply the releases starting from today and onwards. I think in conclusion, we can say that the MPC is a framework that can derive flood mitigation efficiently in operational forecasting systems, and especially the MPC has the capacity to optimize and control complex systems, such as multi-reservoir systems in coordination with short computation time.
Thanks, Jakob. We'll pass over to move to another side of the world, and Torsten, who will give us share his experiences from Denmark.
All right. So from the two previous interesting cases from Thailand, we'll move to another geography. The project that I would like to present is from Denmark. And I think the headline for this presentation could be to plan for the extreme and prepare for what's worse. We have done some flood forecasting in relation to climate change adaptation. And I would like to just go through briefly how climate change has been handled in Denmark. It's a major driver for a lot of projects going on at the moment. Then I would like to just give you a brief overview of the project we have carried out, which is called the Coast to Coast Climate Change River for the river Gudenå, which is one of the bigger water systems in Denmark. Talk about the flood forecasting part and some of the elements of the forecasting system. And finally, about a few of the lessons we have learned during the process. So the River Gudenå project is part of a larger EU-funded project, which is run by one of the regional authorities. And the overall objective of the project is to implement climate adaptation plans for a number of municipalities in the area. And there's a number of different projects, and the one we are referring to, the River Gudnod, it has 7 municipalities who have to cooperate about the climate adaptation. Just a brief, or my brief version of what has happened in terms of climate change adaptation in Denmark. Starting out in 2011, if we were not aware before, then we became aware during some of the serious cloud bursts in Copenhagen, where we had severe damage to the city. And of course, that started the whole process of doing climate adaptation plans for authorities in Denmark. Initially, of course, the focus was on the stormwater systems and defining what kind of service level we could provide in the urban environment. And then, as it often happens when other events occur, the political focus shifts. So in 2013, we had a number of storm surges for the coastline, for the fjord systems. And then, of course, a number of flood protection projects were launched. And again, discussing what level of flood do we need to protect against. And now recently, the focus has changed again. Now it's rivers. We had this year a number of severe flood events in the river systems in Denmark. And here we have to do climate adaptation as well. We have to define which are the effective measures and how do we deal with the level of protection that we incorporate in our plans. And all of this is joined together in the national guidelines and the EU flood directive guidelines, where we deal with risk maps on different return periods, ranging from 5 to 100 years. So from the first phase, talking about mainly on the urban environment, we are now in a second phase where we are looking at the coastline and the rivers. And one specific need which has been expressed is that we need to carry out master plans across these different administrative units. We cannot do climate adaptation plans in one local area. We have to do a plan for the entire catchment, the entire river system. And then another thing that has become apparent is that we need to make a climate adaptation to a certain level. That means protect against floods, say at a return period of 20 years. It's not cost effective to do climate adaptation aiming at the very extreme large events of say 100 years or similar. So that means that when we are trying to do climate adaptation to these events, we also have to be prepared for these emergencies, because making climate adaptation plans aiming at say a 20 years return period, that also implies that we will have emergencies for events larger than 20 years. So to build a system, build a tool to be able to address these different issues, we are using models and we're using a modeling platform. And this is just to illustrate the different timescales we're dealing with. On one hand, we need to look at climate change on the very long term, decades ahead. On the other hand, if we have to deal with forecasting and actions on the short term, we have to deal with timescales which would typically be in hours or days. So these are two different timescales, but the basic modeling tools may be the same. They just have to be adapted to the different types of applications. This shows a project diagram of what was done in the project. First step is to develop and calibrate hydrological models and hydraulic models. Once that has been done, we then branch it into two different applications. One involves configuration of the model in a real-time system using real-time data sources. The other one is as a planning application aiming at the climate adaptation scenarios. And then finally, we develop some web front ends to manage our forecasting data and our scenario outputs. In terms of model technology, for this particular case, we have been using a MyXG integrated hydrological model combined with a 1D Mike 11 river hydraulics model, including flood mapping and data simulation modules. And then finally, it has been configured in the Mike operations environment, also using these web facilities. Just briefly about the GUNO system. The system we are modeling, it's a model built from the spring to the ocean. It involves all the rivers, all the lakes, and to the downstream side, we have an estuary. This is a rather complex system, and we have a number of different hydraulic structures in terms of both hydropower plants and regulating structures. What is shown here on the right-hand side is that we combine information from the river surveys with the lake surveys, and finally with our digital elevation model that is combined to describe both the river and the lake system, and also to be able to describe flooding to the surrounding areas. I will talk mainly about forecasting. I just have one single slide about the planning exercise. As part of these climate scenarios, we ran a number of planning scenarios to investigate what are the effects of different measures. So we ran that for the future climate, looking at lake storage, aquatic weed cutting, excavations of the river profile, land use changes, options for river valley storage, and so on. And based on that, we did cost estimates, and those estimates demonstrate that in terms of cost benefit, you should be aiming at the lower range of the interval in terms of return periods, meaning that your climate adaptation plan should address the 5 to 10 year return period level rather than the more extreme 100 years events, which again, of course, as mentioned before, means that we have to deal with events, emergency situations whenever we have events higher than 10 years. The flood forecasting system itself runs optimized every 6 hours. It collects a number of online data, including rainfall stations at 6 locations, the river water level data. It has a number of online river discharge measurement points as well. And finally, it includes the downstream seawater level. The model runs with the data assimilation, which means that all of these measured data are used as a starting point for our forecast that is embedded into our model. We then run a 3-day forecast, update the web pages, and then of course this means that the authorities, citizens, emergency management, and so on, they can get a status overview and also a forecast information for what's likely to occur in the coming hours and days. This is an overview of the online data collection sites that we have used in the model, a combination of flow measurements shown here by red. The blue dots are all the points where we have water level online data. We have rainfall stations, and then apart from the online data, we also use forecast data for rainfall and for the seawater level. So this operational flood forecasting system deals with forecast in relation to warnings. What we want to do by running this system is to issue warnings to citizens, is to provide a status and forecast overview, of course. And the aim is, of course, to support coordinated operation of the system, such as hydraulic structures. Do we need to store water upstream to protect downstream reaches? And then, of course, the intervention of the emergency agency, where to mobilize, where to move the equipment in time to protect the area. We have developed what we would refer to as a general information flood warning web page, where you can see what is the situation, just a brief overview of the catchment, the points indicating whether it's a low or high water level situation, indicated by color. That gives you a quick overview whether something's happening in the system. On a day like this, where everything is blue, meaning that it's normal water level, you would probably just close down the page immediately. But if you had an emergency situation, you can then look at the individual time series, the water level development in a number of locations, or you can zoom into a local area, your own house, your own address, or your own backyard to see, as shown here by a flood map, will I likely have any flooding issues in the coming period. So that's a generalized system. Then the next step to make it operational would be to link these forecasts with actions, and of course, who will act in this context. That would be citizens securing home and property. It could be emergency services securing roads and infrastructure. We have farmers want to secure the crop and the accessibility to their fields. We have authorities which have to operate regulating structures, and we also had examples of industries who want to protect their facilities. So the next step would be, if we want to link forecast and action, is to tailor some of this information to support some site-specific action. That would be a next step. And of course, underlying all of these issues, if you want to use it for all these action, then a main issue is, of course, the perceived reliability at the local scale. Do the forecast reflect the local conditions as you see it where you live, or does it correspond to your observations locally? So the project status and outlook. The project is not yet completed. We have built these forecasting systems and web pages, which are now subject to testing, where when the testing is finalized, the pages will be made public. Then, of course, during the project, as for the next phases of the project, we have an expressed need for targeting some of these forecast information. Then another issue which has come up after these severe floods earlier this year is the need to develop an action plan across all the municipalities in the catchment. That will probably happen over the coming years. So to wrap it up, I think that planning and forecasting in climate change context, it goes hand in hand. So my closing words would be: plan for the extreme and prepare for what's worse. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that, Torsten. I'm afraid that's all we have time for right now. And if you wish to speak with any of us on a separate but related issue, please feel free to reach out to us. Here are the presentation titles and the contact details for the individual presenters. And finally, please allow me to conclude today's session by thanking the presenters once again for taking the time to share their knowledge with us, and wish you a very good morning or good evening or good afternoon, in fact, wherever you are. Thank you very much.